So we started on day one and we talked about healing being a movement towards wholeness. And we talked about the importance of a community when we're healing. And we talked about wholeness having a sensation and the importance of that sensation as a memory in our bodies, a cellular memory. So when you get a treatment, and after the treatment, Abhyanga or an osteopathic treatment, sometimes there's that feeling of sense of peace, well-being. Try to really get the sense of that sensation as a memory, because when you start to move, that's getting the sense of wholeness. And when you start to move away from that sense, or move away from that sensation, you're moving away from the wholeness and moving more into dis-ease, lack of ease, which leads to disease. Dis-ease comes first. Lack of ease, dis-ease, leads to disease. So your body is always communicating. The prana is always communicating. The whole of life is always communicating with us. Every symptom is a communication. So we start to get a sensation of this wholeness and what it feels like. Wholeness, you could feel light and heavy at the same time because it's wholeness. So you feel maybe this sense of buoyancy and lightness, but you also feel the ground and the earth, and you feel grounded. So there's the gunas. You talked about the characteristics. No, you didn't talk about the gunas, okay. But you talked about the qualities. The 20 qualities, yeah. And that they're opposites. But when you're in wholeness, the opposites are unified as one experience. So you can have lightness and heaviness at the same time as a sensation, because the prana is expressing in all directions. The uprana and the aprana are balanced. So we have this sensation. Whatever it is for you, there's many words you could put to it. So we talked about that. And we talked about a normal conscious breath. We talked about what a normal conscious breath is, how to be with it, how to cultivate it, and how important it is to balancing the physiology and bringing us in connection with wholeness. And you had a nice talk about the doshas, and the vata and the pittas and the kapha. What does dosha mean? There's many meanings for dosha. One of the meanings is that which creates disease. But another meaning is that which sustains life. So dosha in balance sustains life. Dosha out of balance leads to disease. And understanding the doshas, it's a lifetime study. Thinking about it, listening to it, because there's a lot to what the dosha really is, because it's the combination of the elements in different ways infused with the breath of life and the love and intelligence of life, and then expressing, incarnating love. So it's the incarnation of love, creating your physiology and different energy patterns that come together, and they're expressed. We see them in nature, we see them in the physiology. And it's really a broad topic. You got a nice introduction to doshas, but as you study more, you're going to find that there's 5 sub-doshas for every dosha. So you got introduced to 3 doshas, we'll find out later there's 15 doshas. So vata has 5, pitta has 5, and kapha has 5. But for right now, it's sufficient to know and understand the 3 major doshas, and what your predominance is and where your imbalance lies and where your propensity towards imbalance, because that's what allows us to maintain balance with the weather changes and the seasonal changes. And you talked about Danacharya and the routines, the daily routines to help support balance. And talked about Abhyanga. One word about Abhyanga, if you tend to have a high kapha dosha, you want to use less Abhyanga, because you already have enough of that quality. If you have high vata dosha, you want to use more Abhyanga. So for some of the kapha people that had a little bit of extra vata because of travel, stress, whatever, we suggested dashamula oil from the knees down to help with grounding, to help balance the vata without aggravating the kapha. If you have a lot of kapha and you do abhyanga every day, you'll have a lot of kapha, more kapha. You won't need so much oil. If you have a lot of rash, rash can be dry, rash can be wet, rash can be hot. So you want to think about the oil if you have a lot of trouble with rash. If it's a wet rash, not so much oil. If it's a hot rash, maybe coconut oil, something more cooling. So a few extra tips about abhyanga. And then we talked about digestion and the importance of digestion. You need strong digestion for health. You need strong digestion even to understand and learn new information. You require digestion. Digestion is also the assimilation of new knowledge and information. So digestion is not just food. Digestion is all of life. We have to digest and assimilate what Krishna Prana is giving us. So the breath of life is bringing something all the time as a gift. Now, do we have the capacity to embrace what's being given, digest what's being given, and respond to what's being given in an intelligent and healthy way? Sometimes what's being given is too much of something, too much negativity, too much of anger, too much of stress, and then disease can arise, such as PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder is an inability to digest the amount of stress, the amount of energy that's coming at an individual at a moment. It can be low grade over a long time. It can be a huge amount in a short time. But you were not able to digest and assimilate this energy that was coming through, and you develop symptoms. The vata might get pushed, you might get constipation, you might get digestive problems, you might get headache. And if you come in contact with a similar event, it will remind and it will come up. So part of the healing of PTSD is being able to digest in small pieces the event or events that created the original PTSD. So that's how we work some with PTSD patients. It's very common in our culture. It's more common than people realize. Because people think it's just from a war or just from a big acute event. Low-grade, sustained stress over a period of time will also lead to PTSD, because every day you go home from your job where your boss is yelling at you or some type of big stress, and you're not able to fully digest that event, only partially, so over time it starts to accumulate. The vata starts to accumulate in the nervous system. We're fortunate to have Kriya Yoga. You go home and meditate a little, and it helps with the digestion of the things and the events that you didn't digest through the day. So strong digestion is not just the food. It's the whole of life. If somebody comes at you very angry, were you able to digest that event and respond, or are you holding it and not digesting it and now suppressing it And now it's going deeper into the tissues, deeper into the subconscious, and then it rattles around and causes all kinds of problems down the road. And we talked about ways to improve the digestion. There was lots of ways, and we talked about the importance of food combining. And we talked about this gross and subtle digestion. Just to review. Review's good. Because there's a lot of information we talked about that's helpful and useful. We talked a little bit about taste and the effect of taste. So taste can be used when you're trying to decide about food. A lot of times people say, well, what should I eat this? Should I not eat this based on the dosha? If we know a little bit about the effect that the taste will have on the dosha, it helps to make a decision. So now you have the taste and you have the effect, so now you can always think about the taste of the food and the effect that it will have on your dosha. The principle is much more powerful than memorizing off a chart, which is fine to do too. It's fine to have the chart and take a quick look. I want to reduce vata, so these foods are good and these are avoid. But now you have the taste. So any food, you can taste it and say, okay, it's going to have this effect on my physiology, on your physiology. It's always principles reveal, because the principle is what's the essence of life. A principle is something that is essential to life. You can't debate a principle. If somebody wants to debate a principle, you just have to walk away until they discover it for themselves. Air is a principle to life. And anybody that argues with you that says air is not essential to life, you can't have a conversation. You may as well just walk away. All right? Air, water, shelter are essential to life and essential to healing. And there's no debate. Now can we have deeper insight into the principle and how to activate the principle in our life? Shelter. Your sadhana is shelter. Shelter is essential. So we have a shelter, this nice building. We have this body, it's a shelter. Your sadhana is a shelter, good company is a shelter, community is a shelter. Guru is shelter. You take refuge at the feet of the Guru, that's shelter. Mantra is a shelter. And the right food is a shelter. And the last thing we talked about was listening. We talked about if you want to really understand anything, to listen to it. Did anybody listen to their breakfast this morning? Good. Anything interesting happen?
I think I'm going to have to keep working.
Okay, good.
Told me to go get some cinnamon.
More cinnamon?
Yes.
Ah. Good. Yeah. Did you follow the direction? You got more cinnamon? Good. You keep following those kinds of things. It sounds childlike, but it's going to awaken something inside. The inner child that's been taking refuge in the fontanelle is going to come out and play. It is going to reveal a magical world that's always there, but we've stopped looking at it because of our educational process. That's good, Rod. Keep following that. And we talked about listening is so powerful because it's the most subtle of the senses, right? Listening is connected to which element? Ether, the most subtle sense. And when we're connected with ether element, we're actually connected with all of the elements. So when we're listening, we get this sensation of Krishna prana passing through. We get the sensation of the prana coming through. So we get the feeling. And then we get the sight. And then we get the experience of the wholeness of that which we're listening to, and it moves us into a pause. And we come to a deeper understanding because we're moving towards the essence, and the essence of anything comes out of the silence. The essence of everything comes out of the silence. So when we move closer to the essence, we're closer to the silence. And the mind gets quiet. And we come into communion with what we're listening to. And listener and that which is listened to and the act of listening become one, which is the definition of wholeness. And there's a perceptual change. And there's an understanding that goes beyond words. So listening. So that brings us to today. Does anybody have any questions about anything that we've done or talked about for the last 4 days?
Good balance with your doshas.
How do you know you're in good balance? Sama dosha, sama agni. Say.
Samadosha, Samagnishcha, Samadhatu Malatriyaha, Prasanatmendriyamanaha, Svasta Itya Vikriyate.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. So what she's singing is a way to remember. If you can sing that, your doshas are in balance. What they're saying is true health is a balanced dosha, balanced digestive fire, clear senses, clear perception. So your doshas are in balance if you have a sense of good energy and vitality. If your senses are clear, your perception is clear. So the 5 senses have clear and good function. Taste is clean. So with this recent virus, the coronavirus, people lost their taste because the doshas were pushed out of balance. So they lost taste and smell because the pitta was so high. So you have clear senses, strong digestion, good energy, craving for healthy foods, craving for foods that maintain balance, not cravings for foods that create imbalance, regular sleep and wake, clear perception, good memory, mind is clear, speech is beautiful. So when the words come out, they float in the ocean to the person. Sanskrit's the oldest language known to mankind, and it's believed that part of the way the language arose was the saints, sages, and rishis were perceiving the invisible world, and the phenomenon that created it was the sound that it made. So the sound that was created in the incarnation process is the sound that they assigned to that word. So the sounds actually invoke the vibrations that create that phenomenon, which is why the Sanskrit chants are so powerful, because they actually resonate the prana to that exact vibrational effect. We don't have such a beautiful language in English, but the principle is still there. So if your doshas are in balance, the words, the language, the voice will be in balance, and the words will carry a meaning deeper than the sound. Those are some of the ways. Can you think of others? Any others? To know your doshas are in balance. Proper elimination, thank you. So no constipation or diarrhea. Regular, and not urinating every 20 minutes or only once a day. If you lose the sensation of wholeness or forget your breath, stop speaking. Stop everything and wait. It might only take a few seconds. Silence is the sound that precedes creation. When you hear silence, something is about to be created or become manifest. So there's a silence, a little silence right before sunrise, because the new day is about to be created or manifest as the sun comes over the horizon. Yes. And the silence is always there, holding everything. Another thing about the speech, I've read in the scriptures, if you tell the truth and only the truth for 1 year, then what you say will manifest. So it becomes a siddha. So what happens when you eat a meal and you can't digest it? It sticks around. Right? It sticks around. So maybe it stays in the stomach, or maybe it stays in the intestine, but it stays around in some form. It could be gas and bloating. It could be acid reflux, burping, but its effect stays around. So if you had good digestion, you ate the lunch, and now it's passing through quietly, doing its work. It's digesting. But if you're having trouble with what you ate, you're burping, you're tasting, you feel bloated, you feel heavy, you feel sluggish, maybe you have gas, cramping, pain, so you're not digesting it, right? So it would be the same with a perceptual experience. It comes in, and there's a response. But if it usually before it's suppressed, it sticks around a little bit, like the meal. So the thought keeps coming back up, or the interaction with the person. You say you had a bad interaction, somebody yelled at you. If you've digested it, it's digested, it's gone, you're done. If you haven't, it's going to pop back up a few times, even after the event is over. Especially if you're going at the tempo of life. Where we get into trouble is when we're in an environment that's not on the tempo of life, and you're having to move too quickly, so you don't even have time to really think about whether you digested it or not, and you've moved on to the next event, and the next event is so problematic that you don't even notice that the thought's popping up, so now it's gotten suppressed. That's how PTSD, low-grade stress, comes. So these emergency room doctors, somebody just died. And if they haven't had a moment to process that and they're on to the next trauma or emergency or whatever, then they go home and hopefully they have an opportunity to digest all of that in some form. They need to cry or to breathe or to do something. But often they don't. So now that whole day or half of that day has gotten suppressed into the subconscious. It's in the nervous system. It's deep in the tissues, aggravating the dhatus. And they go back to work the next day and it starts all over again because there's no opportunity to process it, to digest it. But it sticks around in the subconscious, and then after months of that, there's a tremor develops, or there's an irritability, there's a chronic low-grade irritability, or a lack of patience, or a lack of compassion, and eventually burnout. Generally, for most people, day to day, if there's an event, and it's not getting assimilated, digested, processed, it comes back up. That's the beauty for meditation. If you sit down to meditate and the mind's really restless, look at what is the restlessness. Look at what thoughts are coming, because those are the undigested thoughts. And the Kriya Pranayama will help with that digestion, but sometimes we still have to look at it a little bit and see where the attachment is or where the unresolved is. Because usually it's not that many thoughts that are coming up. It's usually one or two or three different thoughts coming in a different form. It's trying to disguise itself. But if you really look at the thoughts, there's not that many thoughts. It's just the same ones repeating based on who you are. It's the same. So if it's the same three thoughts, but it's disguised in a little different story, you're moving towards the root of the thought, of the problem that wasn't digested. So what keeps coming back up isn't getting digested, just like the food. Until it becomes constipation, and that's a tamasic state and a dull mind. Yes, and also it affects the ama, the toxicity. The best defense is a strong digestion and strong liver. Strong and healthy liver so it can metabolize the toxins and so you can eliminate. So that's why constipation is a problem. Because when you're constipated, you can't move those toxins out. And that's why seasonal cleansing programs are so helpful and important. Panchakarma, or some type of cleansing once or twice a year, because we can't completely avoid. But a strong digestion will help a lot, because you're going to digest, assimilate, process, and eliminate. Some toxins are more problematic than others. The heavy metals, the benzenes, that can get really stuck in the tissues and the cells. So our best defense is to get the cleanest food that we can get, prepare it well, and then our next best is strong digestion. Keep the liver healthy and strong. So eat your bitter. Eat your bitter so you keep your liver happy and strong, and it can then metabolize some of the problems out and keep yourself from getting constipated so that you can keep eliminating. And drink plenty of clean water. and then do some form of cleansing. It can be done at home. You can go someplace and do panchakarma. You can have somebody that is a professional in that area of Ayurveda. They can help you with home cleanses for a week, where you do some abhyanga, you take some herbs, you take a mono khichdi diet, you strengthen your digestive system, and you balance your doshas and eliminate, and maybe do some bastis, some enemas to help cleanse the system. So often some people will do some type of gentle cleanse at every season, at the change of the seasons. So summer to spring, and spring to summer, and summer to fall. They'll do those three major, cleanse, and then maybe once a year they'll do a full big panchakarma. And the seasonal cleanse could be 3 or 4 days, 5 days, where you go to more of a mono diet, khichdi, per your dosha, and maybe some gentle herbs and some abhyanga, and a slower pace of life. For the days that are per your capacity with your life and your health, it's nice to have some help with that, because somebody can help guide a good amount of days, and you set that time aside, maybe a 4-day weekend. That helps. Helps a lot. And it will deepen the sadhana, it will deepen the spiritual practice, because the channels are all getting more clear. All the channels. We didn't talk about channels in this program. We'll talk about channels in another program. There's channels that are very important. Digestive channel, circulatory channel, nerve channels, and then the subtle pranic channels, they all start to get clean, because the pranic channels are holding these undigested emotions that got suppressed. And now the channel's not clear, the prana is not flowing so freely, so clearly, so it's got a little obstruction. And as the channels get clear, you get more responsive to Krishna prana, the breath of life. It becomes easier to respond to life, easier to digest. And then there's a mind channel. There's a channel for the mind. Manasrota, which gets clean as the toxins from the pranic channels and the nerve channels get clear, the mind channel gets cleared. And then there's a channel between all of us. There's channels for communication. So there's channel. And then there's Mahasrota, the great channel. From the fontanelle to the divine, and from your heart to the Guru. Mahasrota, the great channel. Yes, that's very important. Eat what you can digest. Eat per your instinct and intuition and what you can digest. Because the different people's protein requirements and the density of the food that's required is related to the quality of the mind. And as the mind gets lighter and more transparent, it doesn't need as dense a food as another person. So that evolves naturally. Per the appetite, the digestion. Some people are vegetarian, some aren't. It's a personal choice. But the question is, are they digesting it and assimilating it? Mm-hmm. Soy and tofu does tend to, sometimes can slow the thyroid metabolism a little bit. And there are conversations about estrogen and hormones with soy and tofu, a little more complex than we really have time to go into right now. So I would keep it simple of eat what you can digest and where your taste is, and the mind will, as the mind gets lighter, it doesn't require as dense of food. Yeah, it's problematic. It's almost impossible to find non-GMO corn. When I was in residency, we were in a small town in eastern Colorado, and it was complete farm country and a lot of corn. And I asked some of the local farmers if they could get me some non-GMO'd corn. They didn't even know where to get it. So yeah, it's a problem. I personally tend to stay away from corn because it's hard to find organic, non-GMO'd corn. And GMO'd, so it's been altered, genetically modified. So the intelligence of the body is not going to recognize exactly what to do with it. So it's going to perceive it as a foreign substance, which is going to create an inflammatory response. You're going to get histamines and inflammation because the immune system is a function of perception. So the silent observer that we were talking about is being given this information and is saying, that doesn't look quite right. It's not lining up. It's not lining up with the imprint of life that I know, right? Not I, but the I, the big I, right? Not this I. So it's this big I, the silent observer, saying this isn't quite lining up with the imprint of life. So you better go investigate. So it sends a communication to the immune system to send out the investigator cells, the phagocytes, and various cells go out to kind of sniff around what's going on. They send out a reconnaissance mission. And even the smallest reconnaissance mission in the physiology creates a little bit of inflammation. So right there you've got a little, even if you don't have a full-on histamine response and get all the congestion, there's going to be a little bit of inflammation just from that. Then it comes and brings the information back, and they kind of check it out, and they run it through the data banks, and they say, well, you know, we'll let it, we aren't really too happy about this, but we'll let it pass, you know. But if you happen to be a person that already has a super heightened immune system because of an immune disorder, they're not going to let it pass. That's not going to pass. So they don't get a pass. So if you have rheumatoid arthritis or MS or something that's autoimmune and the immune system is already super heightened, no pass on GMO. So now you're going to have a full-on histamine response, inflammation, and they send out the fire trucks and the ambulances, and it's a 5-alarm fire. So yeah, you want to try to avoid it and get organic whenever we can. But you can't become an organic snob either, because that'll create its own inflammation, right? We don't want to polarize the whole thing. Polarization creates inflammation. So, okay, you know, my oatmeal wasn't organic this morning, you know, nothing I can do about it. Not here today, I'm saying, but, you know, at the hotel or when traveling, you know. So we do the best we can with what we're given. But I see some people are so obsessed with only organic, they're so stressed about it, their vata's off the charts, they're getting inflammation, they're getting more inflammation just trying to get organic than if they would have just ate the non-organic in the first place. Yeah, you see it. I'm sure everybody's seen it. Right? They're food snobs. And it's a middle class problem.
There's a vibration about them.
You can pick it up, yeah. called vata aggravation. Yeah, they have PTSD about not getting an organic meal.
How the gluten, Dr.
Yeah, so, the wheat from India, I don't think it's genetically modified like the wheat in the US. We buy our wheat, if we're going to make chapati, we buy it from the Indian store. When I eat wheat from the US, it causes more inflammation than wheat. Now, there are some people that have a disease called celiacs, and they shouldn't have any wheat because they actually have a genetic allergy to it, and they'll get huge inflammation, and they can't absorb. It causes all kinds of problems. So if there's true celiac, they need to avoid. Generally speaking, the kapha dosha doesn't respond real well to wheat and gluten. Generally speaking, the kapha dosha will reduce nicely without wheat and gluten. Wheat can be inflammatory for a lot of people, especially in the US where it's more genetically modified. Yeah, you just pray over that's why we pray before we eat. Because not only is it giving thanks to the food, especially if you say the mantra, it's going to change the vibration. Because the mantra holds the vibration of the prana that's most in balance. So when you chant the mantra, it's affecting the prana all around and through in creating that vibration, because the mantra came out of the original sound of creation. So the saint and sage who created the mantra was sitting in the silence, observing Krishna prana coming out of the silence, manifesting the 5 elements, then manifesting the contributation or the intermingling of the 5 elements, and then the creation. That made a sound. So when this tree was created, there was a sound, and that sound is what they assigned in the Sanskrit language to that phenomenon. So when you chant that mantra, you create a vibratory effect in the food and the prana and everything. You're giving thanks. So there's something called transmutation, which is a real thing, and it's a scientific fact. And transmutation can happen through prayer and through mantra and through love. If you just have love and look at the food with love, it will transmutate. If you burn a little candle in the south corner of the kitchen when you're cooking, you're acknowledging the Agni of the food, the Agni of the cooking, the Agni for digestion. So you've activated Agni, the prana within the Agni within the prana. That helps too. Burn a candle in the south corner of the kitchen when you're cooking is helpful for increasing the vitality of the food. But you can taste when there's been an argument, and then say another prayer, and then it'll change. Yeah. And you can taste when the food was cooked with love, because even the bitter melon tastes a little sweet. Mm-hmm. Thank you for this opportunity to share some time together, to study and to learn together, to improve our health, our understanding, our sadhana. May it help others. May we grow together. Let us ever meditate more deeply, be ever closer to you. I bow to the divinity within each and every one of you. Om. Amen.